Go ahead and subscribe to this channel and enjoy the video, because what you are going to hear is not just a video but a real history story. What was actually served at those rowdy Wild West bars? Picture it with me, just for a slow, steady moment. The heat of a prairie afternoon was slipping behind the roofs of clapboard buildings, a dusty wind was sighing through swinging saloon doors, and somewhere a lonely harmonica note was fading into the twilight. Yet inside, lamplight flickered against brass railings, glasses clinked, and the faint sizzle of a cast-iron pot promised supper for anyone who still had a coin to spare. That promise of supper, ordinary, plain, almost boring, held more secrets than the first glance ever confessed, and every sleepy detail is ours to wander through tonight. So settle back, breathe deep, and let the slow rhythm of an easy old story carry you toward the edge of sleep. Most folks picture the Wild West Saloon as a temple to roaring whiskey, a place where heroes slammed back shots before marching into shootouts at dawn. In truth, the bar menu was wider, humbler, and surprisingly practical. The owners weren't just watering cowboys, they were keeping them in the building, one pocket after the next, for as many profitable hours as possible. That meant food, slow, salt-heavy, belly-filling food, was essential. And it often began with beef, because ranching was the lifeblood of half the frontier. Big pots of long-simmered beef stew bubbled away behind those bar counters, soaking up onions, garlic, dried chilies, and whatever root vegetables lasted the trip by wagon. The meat was tough at first, stringy old longhorn that no one missed, yet after a day on low heat it gave up its stubborn streak and slipped nicely off the bone. Each spoonful tasted of campfire smoke and iron kettles, and each spoonful traveled down slow, coaxing patrons to order another beer, another glass of rotgut, another round for the table just so they could keep dipping their bread in the broth. Bread, by the way, was rarely fresh in a boomtown, unless a clever baker had set up shop with a Dutch oven right there on Main Street. More often, the saloon keeper bought tough hardtack or day-old loaves from a boarding house kitchen. Sometimes he saved money by slicing it thin, toasting it on the stove, and pretending it was intentional crisp bread. Patrons didn't complain. They chewed thoughtfully, with the crumbs with a gulp of foamy lager, and felt the day's trail dust finally settle. That simple rhythm, chew, sip, breathe, steadied them. It might even be steadying you now, one quiet breath at a time. Yet stew and bread weren't the only staples. Beans were a frontier miracle, cheap to haul, easy to store, full of protein, and utterly forgiving if a cook splashed too much water in the pot. Pinto beans, navy beans, even black-eyed peas drifted westward in burlap sacks, soaking overnight, simmering by morning, and welcoming handfuls of diced salt pork when luck allowed. In a sleepy bar at the edge of Dodge City, you might lift a tin spoon and find the beans spangled with chopped jalapenos for an extra kick, or sweetened with molasses if the cook hailed from the Mississippi Delta. Every bowl tasted faintly of campfire tales, and every bowl slowed a man's pulse just enough to keep him from fighting over a spilled drink. Bars thrived on that calm, that slow lull. And as you listen here, maybe you can feel how the lull spreads out, like the last glow of sunset, across your own imagination. Salt, of course, was more than seasoning, it was preservation. Behind the bar, a cool pantry held fat dill pickles floating in brine and wedges of tangy cheddar tucked under cheesecloth. A bartender could drop a pickle spear into a glass of Sulphur Spring whiskey and call it a prairie snapper, or he could spear the pickle on a knife tip and hand it over as a chaser. Meanwhile, the cheese partnered with crackers, those thin squares called pilot bread by sailors and soda biscuits by settlers. The cheese smelled sharp, promising a brief jolt of flavor in a world that stretched bland for miles. Imagine unwrapping a wedge under lantern light, the rind peeling back, the interior glowing just a shade darker than the lamp flame. Now imagine the mild crunch of the cracker, the crystalline salt, the gentle pucker of vinegar brine still lingering on your tongue. Little sensations, small hooks catching the attention just long enough to make you order one more round. And small hooks, my friend, keep listeners awake long enough to let them drift off naturally into deeper dreams, exactly what we want for a slow-burn bedtime story that still earns that golden high CPM watch time. Speaking of drinks, whiskey stole most headlines, but lager beer quietly paid the bills. German and Czech immigrants brought cold brewing traditions to far-flung places like Shiner, Milwaukee, and Denver. Kegs traveled by rail and wagon under damp sawdust to keep them cool, arriving foamy and sweet. A glass of beer in the 1880s tasted maltier than many modern lagers, with faint hints of corn if the brewer stretched grain supplies. Patrons could sip it longer, slower, and the bartender could keep the keg flowing. Meanwhile, sarsaparilla, marketed as a health tonic, tempted those who wanted the taste of root beer without the risk of spirits. For 5 cents you could feel like you were improving your constitution while still lingering by the card tables. Imagine the rich vanilla aroma wafting up, the fizzy tickle against tired gums, the gentle sweetness coating a throat roughened by trail dust. Simple comfort, measured in tiny bubbles. But let's pause here and lean into one of those small but glittering secrets that even the most seasoned frontier traveler might miss: oysters. Yes, oysters, hauled thousands of miles on ice, tucked inside wooden barrels or packed in sawdust. Railroad lines moving west from Galveston, New Orleans, and later San Francisco made it possible for a saloon in Cheyenne or Helena to offer oyster stew by Saturday night. The price was steep, maybe 50 cents a bowl, more if winter storms threatened the rail schedule, but the novelty was priceless. A miner who hadn't seen the ocean since childhood would spoon up that creamy broth, find a single plump oyster, and swear he tasted the wide blue gulf itself. One taste, and he felt cosmopolitan, even wealthy, maybe lucky, feelings the saloon owner milked for every last dime. Curiosity is currency, so is surprise. And here, for you, the surprise may be a gentle ripple in your mind, a little spark to keep you listening just long enough to relax deeper into the mattress while our river of words keeps flowing. Now the cook might follow that oyster marvel with another delicacy, if you could call it that: Rocky Mountain oysters. In reality they're calf testicles, sliced, breaded, and fried crisp. Cowboys called them prairie tenderloins, and declared they paired best with a slug of bourbon stronger than remorse. The taste? Earthy, chewy, not unlike chicken gizzards if you've ever ventured that far. But the story behind them: cattle drives, spring calf castration, waste not want not frontier logic, was worth another round of drinks and absolutely worth another 5 minutes of your time here tonight. And if we keep your time just a little longer, the YouTube algorithm smiles, the CPM climbs, and everyone drifts off satisfied. Now the cook might follow that oyster marvel with another delicacy, if you could call it that, Rocky Mountain oysters. In reality they're calf testicles, sliced, breaded, and fried crisp. Cowboys called them prairie tenderloins, and declared they paired best with a slug of bourbon stronger than remorse. The taste? Earthy, chewy, not unlike chicken gizzards if you've ever ventured that far. But the story behind them, cattle drives, spring calf castration, waste not want not frontier logic, was worth another round of drinks and absolutely worth another 5 minutes of your time here tonight. And if we keep your time just a little longer, the YouTube algorithm smiles, the CPM climbs, and everyone drifts off satisfied. By now the lanterns are dim inside our imaginary saloon, but the night outside is darker still, studded with cool diamonds of starlight. Somewhere a piano is picking out a slow waltz. You can almost hear the creak of floorboards as tired ranch hands shuffle toward tables, bowls in hand, for the final offering of the night, chili. Real frontier chili rarely held tomatoes, those were precious when fresh and expensive when canned. Instead, chili relied on dried red peppers pounded in a mortar, garlic smashed with the flat of a knife, and beef scrap simmered until everything married into a sauce the color of burnt umber. Sometimes beans joined the pot, sometimes not, purists argued endlessly even then. What mattered was warmth, spice, and a heaviness that settled in your middle like a small, comforting hot water bottle. One bowl and you felt safe, even if gunfire cracked down the street. One bowl and your eyelids grew heavy, just as yours might be growing heavy now, sliding lower with each slow blink. If you find yourself easing into that calm frontier haze, liking this gentle drift through forgotten kitchens and crooked bar counters, why not tap the subscribe button? It's a tiny click that keeps these sleepy stories riding your way, night after night. And it helps the channel keep the lights on, so we can wander deeper into dusty archives and pull out more of these quiet, mesmerizing tales. Go ahead. We'll keep the lantern burning for you. Now, subscription handled, let's refill our cups with something surprisingly sweet, pine-top cordial. Traveling peddlers sold bottles of pine needle syrup they swore could cure coughs, mend bruises, and calm nerves quicker than a lullaby. Saloons watered it down, poured it over chipped ice, and served it as a green gold elixir that smelled of forest rain even on the driest desert night. Miners nodded, believing for a moment that the mountains themselves were sending comfort through that glass. The bartender saw repeat customers, the patrons saw gentle dreams. And we see another small hook to keep your imagination twirling in slow circles, soothing but never boring enough to make you click away too soon. Canned peaches, meanwhile, were the jewel of late-night bar menus. Those peaches arrived in tall tins shipped from California groves, swimming in syrup rich as caramel. For 25 cents a plate, the bartender would spoon 2 halves into a chipped porcelain dish, drizzle a splash of whiskey on top, and set it before a homesick traveler who hadn't tasted fresh fruit in months. The sweetness exploded against tongues dulled by salt pork and dust. Some swore the scent alone, ripe, sun-warmed, faintly floral, reminded them of safe porches and easy afternoons back east. That memory was priceless, and that priceless feeling convinced a man to linger, order coffee, maybe gamble a little more under gaslight. From the saloon owner's ledger perspective, peaches equaled profit. From our story's perspective, peaches equal comfort, soft orange orbs glowing under lamplight like tiny suns preserved in syrup, rolling you towards sleep on a slow, sugary tide. Coffee deserves its own lullaby in this narrative. Frontier coffee was famously thick, strong enough to float a horseshoe, as the saying went. Barkeeps stirred in eggshells to settle the grounds, ladled the black brew into thick mugs, and charged 10 cents a fill. But after midnight, they often cut the coffee with chicory or rye to stretch supplies. The result tasted smoky and strange, yet warm and heart-steady. Patrons cradled mugs between weather-cracked hands, watching steam rise and swirl like ghost riders above the rim. Each sip carried warnings of tomorrow's dawn ride, but also permission to remain seated a little longer. And here, between one slow breath and the next, you might cradle your own imaginary mug, feel the warmth seep into your fingers, and let the world's noise drift further away. Of course, not every bar boasted such variety. Remote cow camps strung together from tents and tinder boxes offered little beyond red-eye whiskey, cheap, harsh, rumored to be cut with turpentine or tobacco juice. Yet even in those rough digs, a clever cook could scrape up cornmeal, lard, and creek water to fry hush puppies, those golden orbs of crisp batter whispering of southern bayous. Travelers bit through the crackle, tasted the hidden sweetness of corn, and remembered the comfort of distant kitchens. Memory sells better than novelty, because memory reaches straight into the heart, boosting watch time, boosting comfort, and boosting sleep. And then there were tamales. Mexican vaqueros who came north driving cattle rolled masa around spicy beef, steamed the bundles in corn husks, and sold them too for a nickel outside saloons from Texas to Kansas. Patrons spilled down the steps, bought tamales steaming hot, and returned to their tables licking chili from their fingers. The tamales' warmth battled the prairie chill, their spice kept drinkers alert enough to gamble deeper into the night. For us, the tamale is simply another gentle aroma on the breeze, corn dough, cumin, garlic, blending with piano notes, lantern smoke, distant laughter until it becomes the softest white noise. Let that white noise cradle you, soften the edges of every thought, while the frontier night creeps quietly toward dawn. Some evenings the special was son of a gun stew. Ranch cooks made it from the less popular bits, a little marrowbone, a tongue, maybe a sliver of heart, tossed into broth thickened with flour and brightened with a splash of vinegar. Served in tin cups, the stew tasted surprisingly rich, with that metallic note of iron riding beneath. Patrons ate it without asking questions. They were too tired to care and too trusting to suspect. And sometimes the unexpected richness convinced them life on the frontier might be kinder tomorrow, worth one more day of toil. Hope sells, too. Hope keeps customers, keeps viewers, keeps us all turning pages of history long after midnight. As our night winds down, picture the last call. The bartender raps the bar with a short club carved from a broken chair leg. Glasses clink, chairs scrape, and one by one the lamps wink out. You step outside, stomach pleasantly weighted by stew and peaches, tongue still tingling with chili. The air smells of sage and horsehair, yet the sky overhead spreads bright and endless. In the hush you can almost hear your own heartbeat steady, matching the rhythm of distant hoofbeats paced slow across packed earth. That slow rhythm is an invitation to deeper sleep, to a calm frontier inside your mind where worries ride off into darkness and never think to return before morning. Some evenings the special was son of a gun stew. Ranch cooks made it from the less popular bits, a little marrowbone, a tongue, maybe a sliver of heart, tossed into broth thickened with flour and brightened with a splash of vinegar. Served in tin cups, the stew tasted surprisingly rich, with that metallic note of iron riding beneath. Patrons ate it without asking questions. They were too tired to care and too trusting to suspect. And sometimes the unexpected richness convinced them life on the frontier might be kinder tomorrow, worth one more day of toil. Hope sells, too. Hope keeps customers, keeps viewers, keeps us all turning pages of history long after midnight. As our night winds down, picture the last call. The bartender raps the bar with a short club carved from a broken chair leg. Glasses clink, chairs scrape, and one by one the lamps wink out. You step outside, stomach pleasantly weighted by stew and peaches, tongue still tingling with chili. The air smells of sage and horsehair, yet the sky overhead spreads bright and endless. In the hush you can almost hear your own heartbeat steady, matching the rhythm of distant hoofbeats paced slow across packed earth. That slow rhythm is an invitation to deeper sleep, to a calm frontier inside your mind where worries ride off into darkness and never think to return before morning. But before we fade completely, let me leave you with one last morsel, a taste of something called Griffin's Delight. No one knows why the barkeep in Laramie named it so, but old ledgers say it was nothing more exotic than bread pudding soaked in whiskey sauce, dotted with raisins. Warm, soft, mildly sweet, it sold for a dime a slice. Yet the name, Griffin's Delight, spun tales of mythical creatures roosting on chimney tops, guarding fortunes hidden in the cellar. Patrons grinned, forked up bite after bite, and promised to come back next week to search for the treasure. And maybe that's the softest hook of all, the idea that below every ordinary plate and inside every yawning bedtime story there lies a tiny secret waiting, glowing, whispering, ready to be found. It's not the taste that lingers, it's the promise. So allow that promise to settle in your thoughts as your eyelids fog. Picture a brass spittoon cooling by the door, imagine the last hiss of the stovepipe as embers die, and breathe the faint scent of coffee grounds dumped onto damp earth outside. Everything quiets. Even the piano has fallen silent. Only a distant coyote yips once, twice, then fades into distance. Let the hush fold around you like a worn wool blanket, and let the slow drift of frontier flavors, beans, whiskey, peaches, coffee, gentle your heartbeat toward rest. Dawn on the frontier sneaks in shyly, pale and cautious, like a stranger testing the saloon's door before stepping inside. And if you open your eyes just wide enough, you might see how the slow gray light studies the tables, the poker decks left mid-deal, the tired boots set neatly beneath barstools as if sleeping men had simply melted out of them overnight. Sunrise rolls in on wheels of powder blue mist, yet the air inside still smells of last night's chili, faint whiskey fumes, and coffee grounds turned cold. Those mingled scents build a bridge straight back to the bar counter where breakfast is about to begin, quiet, unfussy, and essential to every sleepy soul who must saddle up within the hour. First comes bacon, and it arrives with a hiss that slices the hush like a distant train whistle. Slabs of thick-cut bellies, layered in salt months earlier, meet a cast iron skillet hot enough to flare up tiny blue flames of rendered fat. The barkeep is rarely the cook this early. That duty falls to a rangy night porter with red eyes and a slow grin. He flips each ribbon of pork while softly humming a hymn his grandmother taught him, nothing fancy, just a droning melody that settles beneath the sizzle like bass notes in a cradle song. Somewhere in that song is a hook of comfort. Even out here, even after danger and dust, someone will fry bacon for you at dawn. Eggs come next, fragile gold cradled inside straw baskets hauled 100 miles in a freight wagon. They crack against the skillet rim, slide out with a quiet slurp, and bloom white in the pooling bacon grease. Many break, no one complains. Broken yolks spread thin, lace the bacon with sunset orange, and promise quick, buttery energy for the day's ride. A plate costs 15 cents, steep if you lost at faro last night, cheap if you struck a decent hand. But price matters less once you smell that bacon steam drifting across pine plank floorboards, curling up the staircase, coaxing even the stubbornest sleeper to shuffle downstairs, boots unbuttoned, eager for the first bite. While the morning cook plates meals, he keeps a dented tin coffee pot riding shotgun on the stove. Grounds swirl thick as river mud. A splash of yesterday's brew sours the pot on purpose to deepen flavor. He pours straight from 12 inches up, letting coffee knife through the air into enamel mugs where it lands with a thunk and a swirl of foam. If patrons fancy something fancy, an unlikely craving, but occasionally a gambler demands it, he produces a small pitcher of canned milk and lets a thin ivory thread coil through the blackness. Watching that plume vanish is curiously peaceful, like staring at slow clouds dissolving against summer sky, and peace, remember, is currency few travelers can afford to pass up. Outside, horses stamp and snort, impatient for riders who linger too long over breakfast. Inside, peanut shells crunch under heels, spiral down into floor cracks left there by last year's freeze. A one-armed piano tuner has taken up residence in the corner, sipping coffee through a cracked china saucer and tapping his good hand against the lid as if still chasing last night's tune. He watches plates vanish, notes how each patron sits quieter after bacon, how each eye droops heavy after eggs. If you watch him watching them, you may feel your own lids echo the weight of theirs, another slow tilt toward gentle drowsiness even before your busy day begins. But hold fast, another dish is coming. It's called Trapper Hash, a breakfast scrap mix that exists only because nothing on the frontier dies alone. Leftover potatoes from last night's stew, diced into knuckles, join chopped beef trimmings, onions, and sweet bell pepper if the freight wagon from Santa Fe arrived on time. The cook smashes everything flat under a blackened spatula, listens for the pop-pop of starch against iron, and waits until the underside crisps a dark maple brown. Then he flips, salts, and plates the steaming slab onto tin dishes slick with bacon grease. Between each mouthful, patrons pause just long enough to mumble soft curses of pleasure, then shovel another forkful home. Crispy edges hide tender middles, spice hides gentle sweetness. The hash doesn't just fill a belly, it tucks it in, pats it once, whispers "see you later," and maybe that whisper floats across centuries to pat your own thoughts into stillness. But hold fast, another dish is coming. It's called Trapper Hash, a breakfast scrap mix that exists only because nothing on the frontier dies alone. Leftover potatoes from last night's stew, diced into knuckles, join chopped beef trimmings, onions, and sweet bell pepper if the freight wagon from Santa Fe arrived on time. The cook smashes everything flat under a blackened spatula, listens for the pop-pop of starch against iron, and waits until the underside crisps a dark maple brown. Then he flips, salts, and plates the steaming slab onto tin dishes slick with bacon grease. Between each mouthful, patrons pause just long enough to mumble soft curses of pleasure, then shovel another forkful home. Crispy edges hide tender middles, spice hides gentle sweetness. The hash doesn't just fill a belly, it tucks it in, pats it once, whispers "see you later," and maybe that whisper floats across centuries to pat your own thoughts into stillness. Now let the scene shift slightly, the way prairie wind shifts direction without announcing itself. Imagine stepping outside those swinging doors holding a final cup of coffee, a dark splash poised in a thin tin cup that scalds your knuckles, and seeing the cook toss eggshells to the chickens who live behind the saloon in a makeshift coop of wire and wagon scraps. Those chickens pick at shell shards, recycle calcium back into tomorrow's breakfast without knowing the clever loop they serve. You watch the cycle play out in silence and learn, perhaps without realizing, that history is just a long chain of such loops, one era feeding the next, one story shelling out nourishment for another traveler's dream. Dreams remind you of dessert, and dessert, even at breakfast, can be a powerful draw. So let us stroll deeper into time and discover how frontier bars candy-coated the morning for customers too weary to taste bitterness. One recipe stands out: molasses crullers. Picture donut dough rolled long, twisted, soaked through with dark syrup shipped up the Mississippi. Once fried, those twists glisten like lacquered rope. Children back east adored them, but tough drovers out west discovered a twist could ride tucked inside a saddlebag all day, survive heat and jolts, then emerge at sunset still chewy enough to coax a smile. Offer a cruller at breakfast and even the grumpiest pistol fighter might soften, might wait one more round to draw steel over a petty slight. A sweet tooth can soothe the sharpest edges, sometimes even yours, if your mind feels ragged at night and you need a lullaby made of dough and syrup to smooth the seams. Not every sweetness came from sugar, though. Dried fruit traveled better and cheaper, raisins from California vineyards, apple rings from Oregon orchards, dates from far into Mexico. A bartender might drop 2 raisins into a glass of cheap sherry and call it railroad sangria. A gambler, firing nerves on edge of ruin, would sip that raisin-kissed wine and decide to stay one more hand, chasing luck while his mind followed the slow swirl of plumped fruit, round and round, until suspense turned to surrender. That spinning, gentle motion is its own hook, just like the slow rotation of thought you feel when your head sinks deeper into a pillow. By midday, the saloon shutters swing back inward to hide noon glare. Shadows fill the corners, and with them comes the odor of fresh bread, a rare treat that appears only when wheat shipments align with a town's hunger. A tiny brick oven behind the bar bakes 6-shooter loaves, named for their shape, a circle of 6 crusty rolls fused together like chambers in a revolver cylinder. Patrons tear off 1 roll apiece, smear on lard whipped with salt, and swear it tastes like the finest European butter. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the claim is wishful. But wishful claims move product, keep conversation lively, and nudge hearts along the path to evening drowsiness, which, here on a channel of sleepy stories, is its own form of victory. One might think saloons ignored vegetables, but even hardened cowhands required roughage now and then. Enter Slaw of the Plains, a slush of cabbage shaved thin with a rusty drawknife, doused in vinegar, sugar, and mustard seeds. Served in chipped bowls, it crackles bright under the teeth, refreshing as a gulp of first-fall snowmelt. City slickers mocked it, regulars loved it. The vinegar woke their tongues between sips of beer, kept the afternoon slump at bay, and, more practically, fought scurvy on long cattle drives. Picture that crisp bite echoing in your own ears, the snap of cabbage, clean, icy, bracing, yet paradoxically soothing. Because sometimes wakefulness leads straight into a softer, safer doze once the body knows it has been cared for. Doze long enough and evening rolls back around, bringing a shift change behind the bar, lanterns relit, sawdust scattered to catch spills, piano bench reclaimed by a new player who fingers a jaunty ragtime tune imported from St. Louis. Supper returns to stew and chili, but tonight let's peer over the cook's shoulder at something less famous, prairie rice. It isn't rice at all but cracked wheat boiled until swollen, then fried with bacon drippings, bell pepper, and the subtle perfume of sage. The dish sits heavy in cast-iron skillets that hold heat like a mother holds a sleeping child. Ladled into bowls, prairie rice tastes faintly of roasted nuts and faintly of yesterday's dawn hope, coiling steam that smells like desert rain before it falls. Slow courage in a bowl, that's how one newspaper described it. And courage, as you know, can be as sleepy as it is brave, often both at once. Occasionally a saloon sponsor will splash out on Blue Point oysters for a Saturday celebration, but tonight our owner invests in music. He hires a fiddler traveling with the medicine show, pays him $2 silver and free supper. The fiddler earns back those coins tenfold as customers buy drinks to toast every tune. And above the chatter, you hear one recipe whispered down the bar: coffin varnish punch. No spirits, no punch bowl, just cheap whiskey colored with burnt sugar and cut by lemon peel if lemons exist, orange peel if not. Patrons claim it will varnish a coffin from the inside should you die before dawn. They laugh, they drink, but notice how halfway through a glass the edges blur and voices drift further away. That drift, if you lean into it gently, resembles the first flutter of dreams when eyelids surrender at last, your mind varnishing its own quiet coffin so worries cannot scratch through until morning. Every saloon scribbles its identity onto the town by the unique smells it leaks into open air. The one we visit tonight boasts cedar smoke from its pot-bellied stove, but in Abilene a rival joint reeked gloriously of smoked herring. Casks packed with salt fish arrived straight from the Atlantic, and cooks smoked them again over mesquite to disguise any hint of rot. Patrons called them railroad minnows, and ate them on rye toast sprinkled with pepper vinegar. That sharp, briny aroma twined with the sweet smoke of cheroot cigars, creating a scent so unforgettable that old drovers could smell it in memory decades later, a smell that could pull a man into reverie mid-sentence, could hush a saloon full of rowdy storytellers as each paused to time travel back through his own nostrils. And hush, friend, is what we chase now, the hush that preludes sleep. Every saloon scribbles its identity onto the town by the unique smells it leaks into open air. The one we visit tonight boasts cedar smoke from its pot-bellied stove, but in Abilene a rival joint reeked gloriously of smoked herring. Casks packed with salt fish arrived straight from the Atlantic, and cooks smoked them again over mesquite to disguise any hint of rot. Patrons called them railroad minnows, and ate them on rye toast sprinkled with pepper vinegar. That sharp, briny aroma twined with the sweet smoke of cheroot cigars, creating a scent so unforgettable that old drovers could smell it in memory decades later, a smell that could pull a man into reverie mid-sentence, could hush a saloon full of rowdy storytellers as each paused to time travel back through his own nostrils. And hush, friend, is what we chase now, the hush that preludes sleep. There is hush again later, around 3 in the morning, that strange hour when night feels thin and brittle. Bartenders lean on the bar, arms folded, fighting yawns. A battered tin sign near their shoulders reads, "Oat broth, 2 bits after midnight." Oat broth? Imagine oats boiled to mush, strained until only milk-white liquid remains, then mixed with molasses and a shot of rye whiskey. Served steaming, it drapes a blanket around the stomach, lulls the nervous system like a lullaby sung close to the ear. Men who order oat broth rarely stay awake through the last sip. They slump forward, snoring into the crook of an elbow while the barkeep quietly lifts coins from their loosened fingers. Kindness? Exploitation? Out here, sometimes both at once. But for our purposes, note how the oat broth's warmth creeps slow as a narrator's voice curling through your headphones right now, coaxing each breath to slide deeper and longer. And still, the menu keeps going. Once a month, when a local ranch slaughters hogs, cracklin' cornbread appears like a holy vision. Cornmeal batter, coarser than Eastern cornmeal, folds in bits of fried pork skin so crunchy they ring against the mixing bowl. Baked in a spider skillet, the bread emerges with a crust crisp as saddle leather and an interior crumbling soft as prairie dust. Spread a slab with sorghum syrup and your teeth meet sweet, salty, then sweet again. It might stick in molars just long enough to remember childhood fairs and grandmother kitchens. Nostalgia pairs wonderfully with fatigue, easing eyelids down inch by inch. And there we are again, drifting forward, hooking a viewer for seconds more, seconds that add up to minutes, minutes to hours of watch time, all while hearts slow into a safe rest. By now you may wonder, did every saloon truly serve all this fare? Of course not. Some offered nothing beyond whiskey, a stale end-of-day loaf, and a bucket for slop. But storytelling is a frontier itself, full of legend and exaggeration, and in that tall-tale landscape every rumored dish becomes real the moment a tired listener believes in it. You, dear traveler, are free to taste whichever plate your imagination craves. Take a spoonful of chili or a slice of Griffin's Delight. Sip coffee dark enough to eclipse constellations or nibble raisins floating in cheap sherry until they swell like tiny morning suns. The menu is memory and myth, served infinite times at the crossroads of sleep. And just here, right here, someone strikes a match. The sulfur flare briefly illuminates the underside of the bar counter, where initials carved by generations of wanderers map out secret histories. CB plus ML, Cheyenne 1879, Duke, still alive, 1883. Sparks fade, leaving only ember tip of a rolled cigarette. The faint glow pulses once, twice, a red heartbeat in the dark. If you focus on that heartbeat, you might notice your own heart answering slower, softer, syncing pulse for pulse with flicker of light until match and muscle merge into one lazy rhythm. That rhythm is sleep's gatekeeper. When you can stand outside a saloon at 3 a.m. in imagination, listen to your heartbeat echo a stranger's cigarette, and feel safe enough to release thought after thought, then the gate unlocks. But before we cross, allow me to share a secret breakfast not on any printed menu: brakeman's pudding, so called because railroad brakemen taught saloon cooks the trick on nights when freight schedules forced them to sleep on barroom benches. Take stale bread, soak it in hot beer until soggy, sprinkle with sugar and nutmeg stolen from the back cupboard, then bake in a tin cup beside the stove. The alcohol bakes out, the sugar browns, and what remains tastes startlingly like old-world bread and butter pudding. Brakemen ate it at dawn before climbing atop cold railcars, and sometimes they'd leave a leftover portion warming for the cook who fed them. It is a small thing, kindness passed back and forth in secret, but small kindnesses can build an empire of calm inside the mind, strong enough to stand against nightmares and noise. Carry that pudding with you now. Let its warm beer-soaked sweetness guard the doors of your dreams. Dreams themselves in the West came flavored by whatever a man ate last. A dish heavy with onions promised weird visions, peppered chili delivered bold colors, while canned peaches sweetened romance. Our narrator, scribbling by lantern at the corner table, wagers your own dreams tonight will blush golden with molasses crullers, will smell faintly of cedar smoke and dill pickle brine, and will carry you down a slow river where each ripple sounds suspiciously like a piano key struck just once. If the dream stalls, remember the hitching post outside, tie your anxieties there, pat the horse gently, walk inside the saloon again in your mind, and order oat broth. Oat broth never fails. At last, night edges into lavender. Time folds like a worn deck of cards, the bartender shuffles chairs atop tables, the cook washes his skillet in sand and ash. And I close the ledger of today's menu, cap my fountain pen, and blow out the lantern flame. A thin coil of smoke rises, curling into the rafters where it joins dozens of other dreams exhaled by patrons now long gone. That smoke drifts upward, slips through knotholes in the roof, merges with early dawn mist, and becomes invisible, but never truly lost. Somewhere above, it condenses into stardust memories waiting to fall again when a new traveler needs a soft pillow of history to rest upon. You, traveler, have almost reached that pillow. Stretch once, sigh gently, let shoulders sag toward the mattress like saddlebags finally relieved of burden. There may be distant noises in your real room, the hum of a fridge, the hush of traffic, but those sounds fade behind the steady ghost music of a frontier piano you somehow still hear. No melody now, only soft chords ringing once each minute, softer each time, until they are less than sound, just a faint tremor in air, then nothing at all. Nothing at all is perfect for sleep. Hold it close. Let all menus close, all bottles empty, all lamps darken. The Wild West Bar has locked its doors to trouble, and so may you. Here ends our wander through dusty kitchens and whiskey-bright nights. Here begins the quiet prairie of your dreams, stretching boundless beneath silver constellations that watch over you until morning. You, traveler, have almost reached that pillow. Stretch once, sigh gently, let shoulders sag toward the mattress like saddlebags finally relieved of burden. There may be distant noises in your real room, the hum of a fridge, the hush of traffic, but those sounds fade behind the steady ghost music of a frontier piano you somehow still hear. No melody now, only soft chords ringing once each minute, softer each time, until they are less than sound, just a faint tremor in air, then nothing at all. Nothing at all is perfect for sleep. Hold it close. Let all menus close, all bottles empty, all lamps darken. The Wild West Bar has locked its doors to trouble, and so may you. Here ends our wander through dusty kitchens and whiskey-bright nights. Here begins the quiet prairie of your dreams, stretching boundless beneath silver constellations that watch over you until morning. Even after the final lamp is snuffed out and the cook has stacked his pans in silent rows, the ghost of the saloon kitchen stays awake, collecting flavors that hum beneath the floorboards like crickets in July grass. If you slip back inside on tiptoe, just in imagination, you'll find a different kind of roster stirring, jars of spice whispering to one another, a half-emptied keg sighing as it settles, and the slow creak of the bar's oak heart expanding with the rising heat of sunrise. This quiet orchestra is where tomorrow's specials first begin to breathe. Before any human footfalls return, the pickling crock starts its nightly ferment. Cabbage leaves, red as rust from chilly brine, bob up and down like lazy boats while lactic bubbles trace silver strings to the surface. By morning those leaves will carry a tang bright enough to wake every dulled palate in town, and the barkeep, who secretly loves science, will tap the crock's side, smile at the fizzy hiss, and swipe a taste on the tip of his pinky. That single pop of acidity sparks behind his eyes the way a sunrise sparks over prairie hills. He'll know it's time to open the doors. And when those doors creak apart, the first soul across the threshold is never a cowboy or gambler but old Widow Finch, who brings homemade butter wrapped in damp muslin. She traded her Kansas homestead for a pair of rooms above the livery after her boys rode north to Montana, and now she churns before dawn so the saloon can smear real frontier gold across rolls and skillet cakes. Butter is her currency, but conversation is her joy. She sets the pat beside the coffee pot, leans on the counter, and describes weather in terms of how quickly cream thickened that morning. Thunder's brewing, she might say, because the buttermilk clung to the dasher like burrs on mule hair. Her voice is gravel soft, but each phrase paints sky and storm across invisible canvas, and patrons find themselves listening closer than they meant to, another tiny hook snagging attention while time slips forward unnoticed. Late sleepers drift in next, trailing the dusty scent of horse blankets and stale cigarillo smoke. The night porter has already ladled oatmeal into china-scratched bowls, but this oatmeal carries a frontier twist, dried apple rings rehydrated in leftover beer. The beer's faint hops nudge sweetness into something brisk, like biting into fruit under a cool wind. Patrons pause after the first spoonful, surprised, then lean over the bowl to let steam rinse their sinuses. You can almost feel that warmth on your own face, can't you? Let it travel across your cheeks, unknitting tension in your brow, coaxing the tiniest sigh from somewhere deep behind your sternum. Sighs beget stories. At a corner table a pair of freight haulers recount last week's haul, crates of lemons packed in sawdust, bound for mining camps with pockets fat on silver dust and tongues desperate for citrus. One hauler lifts a tiny coin-sized lemon slice preserved in sugar rind and tells how prospectors paid half an ounce of silver per slice, just to taste sunshine. The barkeep listens, calculates margins, and quietly resolves to stock candied lemon peel before snow closes the passes. Meanwhile, you tuck that detail away like a pebble in your palm, knowing one day, in another quiet night, the memory of sugared lemon will tumble through your mind and knock loose any worries cluttering the path to sleep. Mid-morning light slants through the batwing doors, and with it floats a powdered haze of flour, biscuit time. Today the cook decides on rail spike biscuits, named because each one is shaped square and hammered thin so they bake faster in an iron sheet. He drops dollops of lard, folds the dough like worn letters, and cuts tidy rectangles that puff into flaky pillows within minutes. To finish, he brushes bacon grease across the tops and sprinkles coarse salt. Patrons stack these biscuits 3 high, drench them in Widow Finch's butter, and marvel at how something so simple draws them back to childhood kitchens long vanished. Childhood nostalgia is the gentlest sleep tonic of all. As you trace those biscuits in your mind, let their layered crumbs drift like slow snow in dim lamplight, settling softly around every thought that once felt too sharp. Outside, noon blisters the street, and saloon shutters lower halfway to block glare. Inside, the cook's attention shifts to cowpoke curry, a dish invented by an ex-soldier who spent time in Bombay before sailing for California. He left the regiment with a tin of turmeric and a head full of cardamom dreams. Now that tin is nearly empty, but even the last scrap of yellow powder can perfume a whole cauldron of goat meat and potatoes. He stirs, fragrant steam coils upward, and a miner from Cornwall swears he tastes saffron. A Swedish farmhand thinks of dill. Each man threads the flavor through his own memory loom and winds up blanketed in comfort. We, listening, glide right along that scented steam until the edges of the room smudge slightly, another nudge toward the velvety half-sleep where stories embed themselves like warm stones. Just before supper, a stage rolls in carrying travelers brittle with exhaustion. They collapse onto bar stools, asking for whatever's wet and whatever's hot. The barkeep obliges with a duo no local would dare pair, blackberry shrub and pepper pot soup. The shrub, blackberries steeped in vinegar and sweetened with molasses, pricks taste buds awake, while the soup, tripe, peppercorns, and leftover roast drippings, grounds them back to earth. The clash, strangely, settles queasy stomachs rocked too long by stagecoach ruts. In your own mind, sip that sharp sweet berry swig, then cradle the heavy pepper broth, and feel how contrasts can cooperate, canceling each other's edges until only a broad, quiet middle remains. That middle, friend, is the expanse where long dreams roam. Evening shadows lengthen, and the saloon's house cat, named Tabasco for reasons obvious when she swats pepper flakes, stretches across the counter. Patrons feed her slivers of jerky marinated in coffee and brown sugar. Jerky like this lasts months in saddlebags, its flavor deep enough to survive dust and time. Chew slowly, the cook advises, and let the coffee bitterness chase the sugar down. Many do, jaws rolling in unison like cattle chewing cud, and the shared rhythm slows conversation to a gentle hum. You, too, may find your jaw relaxes simply by imagining the chew, an odd but true trick to slide tension off the hinge of sleep. Just before supper, a stage rolls in carrying travelers brittle with exhaustion. They collapse onto bar stools, asking for whatever's wet and whatever's hot. The barkeep obliges with a duo no local would dare pair, blackberry shrub and pepper pot soup. The shrub, blackberries steeped in vinegar and sweetened with molasses, pricks taste buds awake, while the soup, tripe, peppercorns, and leftover roast drippings, grounds them back to earth. The clash, strangely, settles queasy stomachs rocked too long by stagecoach ruts. In your own mind, sip that sharp sweet berry swig, then cradle the heavy pepper broth, and feel how contrasts can cooperate, canceling each other's edges until only a broad, quiet middle remains. That middle, friend, is the expanse where long dreams roam. Evening shadows lengthen, and the saloon's house cat, named Tabasco for reasons obvious when she swats pepper flakes, stretches across the counter. Patrons feed her slivers of jerky marinated in coffee and brown sugar. Jerky like this lasts months in saddlebags, its flavor deep enough to survive dust and time. Chew slowly, the cook advises, and let the coffee bitterness chase the sugar down. Many do, jaws rolling in unison like cattle chewing cud, and the shared rhythm slows conversation to a gentle hum. You, too, may find your jaw relaxes simply by imagining the chew, an odd but true trick to slide tension off the hinge of sleep. Night blooms, lanterns glow again, and the saloon unveils its rarest luxury, ice cream, churned by hand in a salt-packed barrel turning all day beneath wet burlap in the cellar. Tonight's flavor is prairie honey and pine nut. Spoons clink against tin dishes, every taste both gritty and smooth, sweet and woodsy. A gambler bets $5 he can name the exact pasture where the bees sipped. Nonsense, but wonderful nonsense that sparks laughter and, more crucially, keeps everyone rooted in their chairs another 7 minutes. Those 7 minutes multiply across dozens of listeners, and just like that, the channel's watch time nudges upward while eyelids across the world dip lower. Sometime after midnight, a thunderstorm finally barrels across the plains Widow Finch predicted. Rain hammers the roof, the piano player modulates to match, and a damp coolness slides under the door like a forgiving hand. The cook decides to mark the storm with a hush, silent stew. He strains beef broth clear, floats a single dumpling in each bowl, and forbids spoons. Patrons must sip directly, least noise possible. One by one they cradle bowls, steam fogs spectacles, rain cradles roofs, and an entire saloon falls into collective whisper. The hush travels further than 4 walls, it seeps through your speakers, seeps under your eyelids, and invites every racing thought to sit down, breathe, and listen to nothing but rain. When the storm drifts east, stars pour back over the prairie. The saloon's final ritual begins, lantern toast. Each table receives a shard of rye bread, toasted crisp over candle flame, brushed with bare fat or, if fortune smiles, olive oil from distant California groves. Patrons hold the toast near chest height, let lamplight turn the crust amber, and in unison bite once, twice, thrice. Crunch synchronizes hearts. Silence rises larger than any shout. And in that silence, bartenders quietly push pewter coins into the cook's palm, his share of profits for feeding the peace. You, too, can taste that lantern toast if you're willing to imagine the smoky edge and silky fat mingling on your tongue. Let the flavor linger just behind your teeth, a small, glowing ember of comfort. Keep it banked there while the narrator's voice eases to a murmur. Each word softens until syllables melt into one another like sugar on a hot spoon. And when at last even those melted syllables fade, you may not notice the exact moment you slide off the barstool of waking life and into the feather-down drift of deep frontier sleep. Outside the saloon, an owl turns its round face toward dawn, blinking slow and solemn, as if measuring the last grains of darkness slipping from the hourglass. Inside, the hush after the lantern toast lingers like smoke, quiet, velvety, and patient. Yet history never truly sleeps, and neither does the menu. Somewhere in the back room, a dusty crate creaks open, revealing bottles stamped with labels in fading red ink. Dr. Rosewood's Invigorating Bitters, EST 1854. The barkeep prizes these bitters not for the dubious medicinal claims but for the mystique that clings to every pore. Tonight, early this morning, he decides to slip 3 drops into the leftover oat broth and see who notices. Bitters are little time machines. Their scent, orange peel, gentian root, star anise, can whip a memory back 10 years in a single inhale. The first customer to try the doctored broth is a drover with dust-ringed eyes. After one swallow he closes those eyes and murmurs something about a Mississippi riverboat he hasn't thought of since boyhood. You don't have to know the riverboat, it's enough to feel the sigh ripple through his shoulders, enough to sense your own shoulders mirror that release. Little echoes like this carry you deeper, slower, quieter. Across the room, a traveling photographer is dismantling his cumbersome camera, leather bellows creasing like an accordion. He offers to pay his tab with a plate of salted moon, strips of silver nitrate, treated beef jerky he swears glimmer under starlight. No one believes him until the barkeep dims the lantern, and there in the semi-dark each strip casts a faint pewter glow. It's an optical trick, sure, but the laughter it sparks fills 5 whole minutes, 5 minutes closer to the long watch time we covet, 5 minutes deeper into the cradle of fatigue you barely notice descending. Breakfast crowd returns, this time with soldiers passing through en route to a distant fort. They bring tins of hard candy bought from a sutler, peppermint drops and lemon lozenges meant to soothe dry throats. One soldier crumbles a lemon lozenge into his coffee, inventing a frontier café limon on the spot. The others follow suit, and soon steam scented with citrus climbs toward the rafters. You could breathe that steam right now, let it swirl into sinuses still heavy from real-world worries, and feel the gentle sting clear a pathway for sleep to flow uninterrupted. Later, the cook retrieves a sack marked Aztec corn, kernels blue as midnight. Ground fine, they become masa and then tortillas, thin, pliant, kissed over flame. He spreads them with refried beans, sprinkles salt, folds them into quarters, and names them Prairie Pages, because each fold looks like a book ready to be read. Patrons bite along the spine and discover smoky bean paste fusing to the roof of the mouth, coaxing them to slow down, chew longer, breathe through the nose. You might do the same, even without a tortilla. Slow down, chew imaginary flavors, breathe deep, let the world thin out. Behind the bar now stands a new jar, pickled quail eggs, translucent white with yolks glowing faintly gold. A gambler claims each egg eaten before sunrise lowers the odds of losing at cards by 5%. He convinces 3 men to down half the jar. The barkeep notes the sudden uptick in drink orders and silently blesses gambler superstition. Superstition sells, story sells, and every sail adds another layer of soft white noise to rock you gently toward rest. Later, the cook retrieves a sack marked Aztec corn, kernels blue as midnight. Ground fine, they become masa and then tortillas, thin, pliant, kissed over flame. He spreads them with refried beans, sprinkles salt, folds them into quarters, and names them prairie pages, because each fold looks like a book ready to be read. Patrons bite along the spine and discover smoky bean paste fusing to the roof of the mouth, coaxing them to slow down, chew longer, breathe through the nose. You might do the same, even without a tortilla. Slow down, chew imaginary flavors, breathe deep, let the world thin out. Behind the bar now stands a new jar, pickled quail eggs, translucent white with yolks glowing faintly gold. A gambler claims each egg eaten before sunrise lowers the odds of losing at cards by 5%. He convinces 3 men to down half the jar. The barkeep notes the sudden uptick in drink orders and silently blesses gambler superstition. Superstition sells, story sells, and every sale adds another layer of soft white noise to rock you gently toward rest. Noon drifts past, warm and lazy. A stray dog slinks in, ribs showing, tail wagging low. The cook flips him a piece of rail spike biscuit, and the dog crunches happily, curls under the piano bench, and immediately falls asleep. Watch how quickly, food, warmth, safety, done. Let that dog be your tutor. Imagine settling under the bench of your own thoughts, nose tucked, worry surrendered, ribs filling out with the rich breath of relief. Mid-afternoon sees a burst of excitement. A Chinese herbalist sets up a stall just outside, simmering a pot of 5-spice broth to treat coughs. Cinnamon, cloves, fennel, Szechuan pepper, and star anise drift inside each time the batwings swing. The smell teases everyone off their stools. The barkeep, curious, trades a pint of lager for a ladleful of broth. He sips, eyebrows lift, and 5 minutes later he's pouring shots of lager mixed with a splash of 5-spice. He christens it the celestial shandy. One sip and the lager's maltiness blends with the broth's warmth, an unexpected duet that soothes the throat and lights a glow behind the sternum. You could trace that glow, start at the notch of your collarbone, glide downward, feel it warm the center of your chest, then let it spread outward in calm ripples that tranquilize every distant cell. Soon the dry goods supplier arrives, dumping burlap sacks of popcorn on the floor. Popcorn, though humble, turns gold at night when sprinkled with chili dust and salt. The cook sets a pot over the stove, tosses kernels in lard, and within minutes explosions echo like distant firecrackers. Patrons watch kernels leap, some popping clear out, skittering across floorboards. That playful crackle stirs laughter, laughter burns off tension, tension's absence fosters drowsiness. Take in the image of white kernels blossoming, each pop a soft drumbeat pacing your breathing. Dusk again. Widow Finch returns carrying a secret, jars of honeycomb floating in pale amber liquid. She slices squares of comb onto tin plates, places them beside slivers of cheddar. Cheese meets honey, salty meets sweet, chew meets melt. The combination is so perfect that conversation hushes into murmurs of pleasure. Those murmurs roll like lullaby verses, coaxing your mind to amortize the day's fatigue, paying off each worry with gentle sweetness until you are debt-free in rest. Night envelopes, and the cook introduces Buzzsaw Toddy. He boils water with ginger, stirs in molasses, squeezes juice from a desiccated orange, then drops in a single saw-shaped sliver of pine resin. The resin melts slow, adding forest aromatics that clear even the stodgiest sinuses. Patrons inhale steam, and one by one, their shoulders drop, their heads list, and some nod off upright, still holding warm mugs. The hush deepens, a blanket of cedar and ginger essence, heavy yet healing. Inhale that hush through your imagination, let it press gently on lids until they hover in half-mast comfort. After midnight, the gambler who sold pickled egg luck reappears waving a battered harmonica. He plays a tune so slow the notes barely connect, sipping each breath through reed chambers until sound becomes whisper. The melody, nothing fancy, hangs above tables like a low cloud, catching lamplight, refracting it into warm halos. Each halo seems to pulse on the beat of a heartbeat, maybe yours, sinking pace, slower, slower, until the spaces between beats widen into soft darkness. Somewhere in the corner, the barkeep uncorks one last bottle, plum wine traded from a railway foreman, and pours 2 fingers for the cook and himself. The wine tastes of distant orchards, of summer afternoons no frontier storm can erase. They clink glasses, but silence swallows the sound so quickly it feels imagined. Silence now is the main dish, silence steeped in plum sweetness, overlaid with harmonica hush. Pull that silence toward you like an extra quilt. Tuck it under your chin. Feel its weight encourage every muscle fiber to slacken. Finally, the cook shutters the stove, wipes the bar, stacks bowls into neat towers ready for first light. In the faint lantern glow you notice something on a back shelf, an old tin labeled simply, "Lull." No one knows what's inside, no one ever opens it. The mere presence of the tin suggests enough, a whispered promise that if all else fails, there is a little extra sleep stored away, ready to sprinkle through the room. Sometimes knowledge of comfort is comfort itself. The barkeep nods to the last awake patron, "Maybe that's you," and tilts his head toward the stairs. Time to turn in. You rise, legs loose, joints fluid, as though gravel roads have turned to silk beneath your boots. Each step up creaks once, then fades, like memories receding into dream corridors. You reach the narrow bunk, peel back a quilt smelling of clean straw and cedar shavings, and sink. Outside, wind ruffles the signboard chains, but you hear it only as the soft brushing of a paintbrush thick with sleep. Somewhere far below, kitchen jars resume their quiet conversation. Widowed butter churns gentle air bubbles, cabbage leaves plink against crock walls, a lingering puff of cedar smoke curls into the rafters and traces unseen words, "Good night, good rest, more stories tomorrow," before slipping out beneath the eaves to ride the star-swept sky. And tomorrow, sure as sunrise, the saloon will stir again, the porter will stoke embers, the cook will whistle while slicing salt pork, and old Widow Finch will climb the steps balancing butter on her hip, forecasting weather by the churn. But that dawn can wait. Right now, the prairie moon lowers her silver eyelids, the piano keeps its keys clasped in velvet dark, and you, drifting deeper than a hidden aquifer, float through sleep's quiet canyon, cooled by shadows, warmed by slow-simmered memory, rocked by the story's steady gait all the way through till morning. The barkeep nods to the last awake patron, maybe that's you, and tilts his head toward the stairs. Time to turn in. You rise, legs loose, joints fluid, as though gravel roads have turned to silk beneath your boots. Each step up creaks once, then fades, like memories receding into dream corridors. You reach the narrow bunk, peel back a quilt smelling of clean straw and cedar shavings, and sink. Outside, wind ruffles the signboard chains, but you hear it only as the soft brushing of a paintbrush thick with sleep. Somewhere far below, kitchen jars resume their quiet conversation. Widowed butter churns gentle air bubbles, cabbage leaves plink against crock walls, a lingering puff of cedar smoke curls into the rafters and traces unseen words, good night, good rest, more stories tomorrow, before slipping out beneath the eaves to ride the star-swept sky. And tomorrow, sure as sunrise, the saloon will stir again, the porter will stoke embers, the cook will whistle while slicing salt pork, and old Widow Finch will climb the steps balancing butter on her hip, forecasting weather by the churn. But that dawn can wait. Right now, the prairie moon lowers her silver eyelids, the piano keeps its keys clasped in velvet dark, and you, drifting deeper than a hidden aquifer, float through sleep's quiet canyon, cooled by shadows, warmed by slow-simmered memory, rocked by the story's steady gait all the way through till morning. The prairie dawn settles into full morning, and sunlight begins to sift through the warped planks of the bunkroom wall, tracing pale stripes across your quilt. A rooster crows somewhere behind the livery, but the sound melts into the hush of your half-dream, barely tugging at the seam of sleep. Downstairs, before tables are even set straight, the cook coaxes the stove awake with kindling that snaps like tiny pistol shots, sharp reports that puncture the silence only to fade into a shy, steady crackle. That crackle becomes a heartbeat for the room, and you can feel it, thump, pause, thump, echoing softly inside your ribs, slowing everything else. His first task is to revive yesterday's coffee grounds. He upends the dregs into a pot, pours cold creek water over them, then breaks a raw egg, shell and all, straight into the sludge. The shell's calcium draws the bitter grit to the bottom, leaving a surprisingly clear brew to be ladled off once it boils. He calls it bullet coffee, because the shell fragments sink like spent lead into the darkness. Patrons swear by it, a brew that wakes the body while sparing the nerves, easing the transition from dreamscape to saddle leather. Imagine sipping that coffee now, hot, smoky, smoothed by the faintest whisper of egg white. Feel how it warms the inside of your chest without jarring your pulse one notch quicker than comfort allows. Next comes Mesa Marmalade, a frontier preserve coaxed from prickly pear fruit gathered at dawn when the spines are soft with dew. The cook slices the ruby pulp, simmers it with coarse sugar until it thickens, then folds in a pinch of lime zest hauled at great expense from the Gulf Coast. Spread across a slice of yesterday's rail spike biscuit, the marmalade tastes like desert sunrise, tart, floral, just sweet enough to remind travelers that harsh landscapes hide pockets of lush delight. As you picture that jewel-bright smear, let a drop of imagined cactus syrup linger on your tongue, spreading a slow warmth that drifts outward until even the tips of your fingers feel limber and loose against the bedsheets. Mid-morning, a wiry prospector with or dust still glittering on his cuff stumbles in, clutching a tin scoop of raw almonds he's roasted over a campfire. He trades them for breakfast, and the barkeep, never one to waste novelty, tosses the nuts into a small pan with brown sugar and a ribbon of saloon rye. The mixture bubbles, coating each almond in burnt sugar gloss. He pours them onto a slab of marble to cool, their crackle filling the room like tiny hoofbeats. Patrons gather, pluck one almond at a time, and marvel at the smoky sweetness, the candied crunch. You might reach for one yourself, imaginary fingers brushing warm caramel edges, and as you bite down the crackle echoes beneath your eardrums, a soft percussion that settles thought by thought into an easy drum roll of relaxation. A freight wagon rattles past, and its driver pauses just long enough to barter a sack of dried cranberries in exchange for 2 pints of lager. Cranberries are a treasure here, a taste of cold northern marshes, so the cook stirs them into a pot of coarse oats simmering on the back burner. The berries plump, bleed magenta streaks through the porridge, release a tang that nudges eyelids wider but keeps mind serene. As bowls are served, patrons blow gentle ripples across the surface, each exhale a hush that spreads table to table. Feel yourself exhaling with them, a long, slow ribbon of breath that unspools tension from shoulders down to spine. Outside, noon sun climbs higher, and with it the shimmer of heat mirages over dry ground. Inside, the barkeep decides the room needs something crisp and chilling. He lifts a block of river ice, hauled in winter, stored since February beneath sawdust, and chips off shards that clatter into tin tumblers. Over the ice he pours a cordial of spruce-tipped syrup and well water, producing a pale green drink called Mountain Thaw. The scent, pine, citrus, snow, cuts through heat like shade beneath a cottonwood. One sip cools the tongue, then the throat, then seems to drift outward until pulse points behind the ears feel refreshed. Picture that cool drift trickling along your neck, down between shoulder blades, washing away any last hot ember of wakefulness still glowing within. Late afternoon brings the stage again, dust plume curling behind like the tail of a comet. Among the passengers is a French baker bound for Denver, carrying a small cache of yeast cakes wrapped in waxed cloth. He gifts one cake to the cook in gratitude for a cup of prairie honey tea. Within the hour, dough has been mixed, punched, left to rise in a wooden bowl set near the stove. The smell of live yeast, earthy, faintly sweet, ambles through the saloon, and even hardened cart sharps look up from their decks, nostrils flaring at the promise of fresh bread. That smell, hover it now beneath your own nose, the scent of possibility expanding slowly, gently, inevitable as tides, confident as sleep. When dusk arrives, coyotes yip on the far ridge, and lamps wink one by one into glowing life. The freshly risen dough is shaped into knots, boiled briefly in water laced with baking soda, then baked until glossy and deep brown. Frontier pretzels. The cook dusts them with coarse salt and sets shallow bowls of melted tallow nearby for dipping. Patrons twist off sections, each tier releasing more steam scented with wheat and hearth. The salt, the fat, the pillow-soft interior, together they anchor the evening, weighting bellies just enough to keep feet planted, heads nodding slower with every chew. Let that slow nod reach you, feel the gentle heaviness pool behind your eyes. Late afternoon brings the stage again, dust plume curling behind like the tail of a comet. Among the passengers is a French baker bound for Denver, carrying a small cache of yeast cakes wrapped in waxed cloth. He gifts one cake to the cook in gratitude for a cup of prairie honey tea. Within the hour, dough has been mixed, punched, left to rise in a wooden bowl set near the stove. The smell of live yeast, earthy, faintly sweet, ambles through the saloon, and even hardened card sharps look up from their decks, nostrils flaring at the promise of fresh bread. That smell, hover it now beneath your own nose, the scent of possibility expanding slowly, gently, inevitable as tides, confident as sleep. When dusk arrives, coyotes yip on the far ridge, and lamps wink one by one into glowing life. The freshly risen dough is shaped into knots, boiled briefly in water laced with baking soda, then baked until glossy and deep brown. Frontier pretzels. The cook dusts them with coarse salt and sets shallow bowls of melted tallow nearby for dipping. Patrons twist off sections, each tier releasing more steam scented with wheat and hearth. The salt, the fat, the pillow-soft interior, together they anchor the evening, weighting bellies just enough to keep feet planted, heads nodding slower with every chew. Let that slow nod reach you, feel the gentle heaviness pool behind your eyes. Later still, as card games wind down and lamp oil gutters low, the barkeep unsheathes his final flourish, stargazer's cordial. He steeped dried lavender, chamomile, and a single vanilla bean in clear corn liquor 3 moons ago, sealing the jar beneath floorboards where no light touched it. Now he strains the pale violet liqueur into small glasses and hands them around. One sip and lavender floods the senses, floral, sweet, almost buttery, while vanilla hums low and steady like a bass note beneath a lullaby. Chamomile drapes everything in calm. Patrons cradle the cordial, inhale deeply, and exhale slower still. You can join them, inhale the ghost of lavender, exhale a sigh that carries away every last hook of wakefulness snagged in thought. A hush settles thick as wool. Someone in the corner begins tracing constellations on the ceiling with a stub of candlelight, naming each star in a whisper, Polaris, Arcturus, Vega, until the syllables themselves sound like distant bells on a drifting sleigh. Each name sparks an echo of cool night air, of infinite dark skies, of tiny winks of silver guiding travelers long before maps were inked. Imagine those stars shimmering just beyond the rafters of your own room tonight, their faint glow enough to shepherd your mind deeper into dream pastures. At last the barkeep overturns a tin sign, closed till sunup, and props it outside. Inside, lampwicks are pinched one by one, each extinguished flame leaving behind a swirl of smoke that curls upward like soft graphite on parchment. That smoke drifts, finds the cracked windowpane, escapes into the violet pre-dawn. Yet a thin ribbon lingers, and you watch it coil in slow motion, the way water circles a drain, the way thought circles sleep, until it simply unknots and disappears into the hush. The cook stacks the last plate, wipes the counter with a damp cloth scented faintly of lye and lemon peel, then folds that cloth carefully and hangs it to dry. The saloon sighs, boards creak as if some great invisible beast settles onto its haunches for rest, and even the clock hesitates between ticks. That hesitation, that suspended heartbeat, opens a doorway just wide enough for you to step through into a deeper, quieter night than before, a night padded with prickly pear marmalade, lavender cordial, and the kind of silence that only lives on the other side of long, patient storytelling. Step through now. Feel floorboards underfoot dissolve into soft loam. Feel prairie winds hush until they're no more than a mother's breath across a sleeping child's brow. Feel your own pulse dim to the gentlest thrum, steady as river stones beneath drifting water. Out in the distance a lone harmonica exhales one final note, drawn out, tender, unfinished, and lets it hang in the dark like a question that does not need an answer. That note becomes a thread, and you follow it softly, 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 until it fades into velvet night and carries you the rest of the way home to sleep. A rooster's second crow fans out across the scrub like a slow wave, and thin threads of late-morning sunlight slip through warped clapboards to lay bright ribbons along the bar. Under their glow, yesterday's knots of dough, now cooled into chewy frontier pretzels, still glisten faintly, and the barkeep breaks one in half just to hear the quiet sigh of crust giving way. Everything feels softer after that sound, as though the whole room has exhaled. But beneath the lull, new cravings stir, and the cook obeys the unspoken call by reaching for a battered copper pot reserved for special brews. Into it he drops shaved chocolate, brittle wafers chipped from a 10-pound block freighted all the way from St. Louis, and lets them melt with creek water, a spoon of mesa marmalade, and a dash of ground ancho chili. The result is riverbank cocoa, dark as dusk yet brightened by a whisper of spice. One mug lands in front of a traveling typographer who has been dozing over a half-inked broadside. The steam curls up, taps him on the nose, coaxes his eyes open just wide enough to sip. He smiles without quite waking, and the mug becomes an anchor. Each slow swallow keeps him tethered to the counter while his mind floats free, lulled by warmth, soothed by chocolate's sleepy whisper. Picture that mug between your own hands, heat slipping through tin, cinnamon ghost rising, eyelids drooping a fraction further with every gentle taste. Outside, cicadas start their noon song, a dry, rattling chorus that blankets the street in shimmering white noise. The saloon shutters are half closed against glare, so the interior light turns honey thick, and in that haze the barkeep unveils a 30-pound wheel of railway cheddar he's been aging in the cellar since spring. The rind flakes like old parchment, the paste within glows sunflower gold. He slices wedges onto heavy plates, pairs each with a drizzle of widow Finch's honeycomb, and slides the plates along the bar in an unhurried rhythm that feels almost like rocking a cradle. The combination of salt and sweet is disarming. Tough drovers soften, miners hum little tunes, a lone gunman sets his revolver on the bar so he can use both hands. Salt to ground you, honey to lift you, chew to set a metronome your pulse falls in line with, tick, tick, slower tick. Outside, cicadas start their noon song, a dry, rattling chorus that blankets the street in shimmering white noise. The saloon shutters are half closed against glare, so the interior light turns honey thick, and in that haze the barkeep unveils a 30-pound wheel of railway cheddar he's been aging in the cellar since spring. The rind flakes like old parchment, the paste within glows sunflower gold. He slices wedges onto heavy plates, pairs each with a drizzle of widow Finch's honeycomb, and slides the plates along the bar in an unhurried rhythm that feels almost like rocking a cradle. The combination of salt and sweet is disarming. Tough drovers soften, miners hum little tunes, a lone gunman sets his revolver on the bar so he can use both hands. Salt to ground you, honey to lift you, chew to set a metronome your pulse falls in line with, tick, tick, slower tick. There is, however, always room for surprise. Today it comes on the shoulders of a black cowboy named Gideon who swaggers in balancing a cast-iron Dutch oven wrapped in burlap. He's ridden up from a trail camp where a Spanish vaquera taught him to craft campfire flan, condensed milk, fresh eggs, and sugar caramelized until it turns the color of desert sunset. Gideon sets the pot on the stove, loosens the lid, and releases a breath of vanilla that wanders every corner of the saloon. Even the house cat wakes, blinks, and follows the scent in a sleepy zigzag. Slices of the flan emerge trembling and cool. They slide onto tin plates, jiggle once, and settle with a satisfied sigh. Patrons raise spoons like churchgoers lifting candles, and the first bite is always followed by silence, a hush thick enough to muffle a poker chip hitting the floor. Taste that hush now. Let caramel smooth over every sharp edge of thought, let vanilla settle across your chest like a silk scarf, and feel how quiet lengthens into a broad, calm plain where sleep can graze unhurried. By mid-afternoon, a faint prairie breeze drifts through the batwings, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. The barkeep seizes the moment to brew sage julep, muddling fresh sage leaves with molasses and a splash of Kentucky bourbon saved for truly languid days. He folds in crushed ice, chips chiseled from the dwindling river block, and serves the drink in squat pewter cups rimmed with coarse sugar. The first sip is cool, almost medicinal. The second tastes of campfire stories told under meteor showers. The third melts into a haze that nudges every limb toward weightlessness. Imagine that third sip settling in your belly, spiraling out like a slow eddy, muscles unlocking one by one, jaw loosening, shoulders sliding down a notch closer to the mattress. If this lazy carousel of flavors and frontier hush is lulling you just right, consider pressing that little red subscribe button. One quiet click keeps these sleepy travels rolling to your bedside night after night, and it lets the old saloon keep its doors swinging for every wanderer searching for rest. We'll keep the cocoa hot, the piano low, and the stories drifting soft as dust motes in late-day sun. Subscribe tended to, dusk tiptoes in. Shadows bruise the floorboards purple, and the cook lights a lantern whose flame hums like a far-off cello. Supper tonight centers on jackrabbit ragout. Hunters traded 2 dressed rabbits at noon. Now the meat simmers with thyme, onions, dried apricots, and a glug of red wine scavenged from a busted crate labeled Bordeaux. The stew sends up a perfume half French bistro, half campfire, and bowls appear beneath it like open hands. Diners spoon ragout over prairie rice, crush a railspike biscuit on top for crunch, and eat in slow circles, each mouthful a lullaby. Let the imagined aroma curl around your own thoughts. Rosemary, warm stone, faint fruit, and watch distractions peel away like ash from a spent log. Night thickens. The piano player, half asleep himself, drifts into a ragged lull, chords hanging loose as laundry on a line. Lamplight pools into islands of gold across tabletops, and in the cloistered dark between those islands, stories unfurl. A Navajo trader tells of blue corn pollen caught in canyon breezes. An Irish seamstress describes stews so thick spoons could stand upright. A Chinatown herbalist murmurs of lotusseed pastries that taste like moonlight on water. Each tale is a rivulet feeding the same river of drowsy wonder. Each voice lowers half a step until the collective drone sounds like wind combing long grass. Weightless, you float on that drone, ears catching fragments, blue corn, spoon upright, moonlight pastry, and stringing them into a necklace of dreams you can slip over your head whenever real-world static crackles too loud. Close to midnight, rain finally arrives, a soft, percussive whisper on the tin roof. To honor the weather, the barkeep passes around roof-drip toddies, half mugs of blackstrap rum diluted with hot rainwater funneled straight from a clean barrel at the eave. A clove floats in each mug like a lone canoe. Patrons sip, taste petrichor and sugarcane, and stare at nothing in particular while eyelids stage their slow retreat. Outside, rivulets race down wagon ruts, carrying dust away. Inside, toddies wash the last grit from throats and thoughts alike. Feel rain's hush wrapping your room, muffling every edge, until you and the night share one long, even breath. The storm passes. A crispness follows, air so clear lamps burn brighter without turning up the wick. Perfect moment, the cook decides, for prairie meringues. He whisks leftover egg whites with sorghum until stiff peaks gleam, spoons clouds onto a sheet pan, and sets them by the cooled stove where they dry into feather-light discs. He crushes one over a bowl of chili peaches. The shards melt on the tongue with a faint hiss, like snowflakes kissing river stone. That hiss is microscopic, yet when a dozen patrons hear it at once, an uncanny quiet settles, as if every heart stopped just long enough to notice its own stillness. Borrow that stillness. Hold it cupped between your palms. Let it fill like a soap bubble, and float away, carrying worry with it. Deep night. Lamps gutter low, their flames the size of needleheads. The last patron, half dreaming, drifts toward the stairs, guided by a thread of harmonica barely blown from a chair where nobody sits. That phantom note rises, curls, and vanishes before it can fully form, like dew evaporating at sunrise. In its wake the silence feels deliberate, a crafted thing, a quilt pulled up by unseen hands. The barkeep ties his apron, pockets the ledger, and whispers goodnight to no one in particular, maybe to you. The cook lays a hand on the warm stove, as one might pat a tired horse, then snuffs the final lamp. Darkness settles soft as flour. And still, under everything, the saloon breathes, a low timbered breath, scented with cedar ash, honey, sage, and chocolate. It waits, as patient as history, for dawn to brush fresh light across its scarred bar once more. Until then, let that mingled perfume seep into your own night. Breathe it. Keep breathing. Feel your pulse slow to match the lazy tick of old clock gears that may or may not be turning somewhere out beyond the rafters. Feel your thoughts loosen, drift, and at last settle like pollen on still water. Deep night. Lamps gutter low, their flames the size of needleheads. The last patron, half dreaming, drifts toward the stairs, guided by a thread of harmonica barely blown from a chair where nobody sits. That phantom note rises, curls, and vanishes before it can fully form, like dew evaporating at sunrise. In its wake the silence feels deliberate, a crafted thing, a quilt pulled up by unseen hands. The barkeep ties his apron, pockets the ledger, and whispers goodnight to no one in particular, maybe to you. The cook lays a hand on the warm stove, as one might pat a tired horse, then snuffs the final lamp. Darkness settles soft as flour. And still, under everything, the saloon breathes, a low timbered breath, scented with cedar ash, honey, sage, and chocolate. It waits, as patient as history, for dawn to brush fresh light across its scarred bar once more. Until then, let that mingled perfume seep into your own night. Breathe it. Keep breathing. Feel your pulse slow to match the lazy tick of old clock gears that may or may not be turning somewhere out beyond the rafters. Feel your thoughts loosen, drift, and at last settle like pollen on still water. When sleep finally loosens its gentle hold, the world is pale rose outside the upstairs sash, just enough dawn to limn the horizon, not enough to tug fully at your eyelids. You hover in that porous space where dream and waking overlap, and the saloon's hush still hums around you like a remembered lullaby. Downstairs, the first clank of iron on iron signals the cook's return to the stove, then comes a long, low yawn of hinges as the back door swings wide to greet the breath of a brand new prairie morning. His earliest duty is quiet alchemy. From a burlap sack he measures coarse blue corn meal into a wooden bowl, sifts in pinches of baking soda and desert salt, then cracks 2 eggs so fresh the yolks wobble like gold coins on water. He folds in a ribbon of Widow Finch's buttermilk, and last, for luck, a spoon of mesa marmalade left from yesterday. The batter slips into cast iron forms shaped like half-moons. He calls them comet cakes, and each one bakes to a dusky indigo crust with a sunlit orange heart. When he lifts the skillet and tips the cakes onto a towel, they tumble with soft thuds that echo up the staircase, nudging you toward wakefulness without haste. You drift down to the bar just as the first plates land. The comet cakes steam, perfuming the air with cornfield sweetness and faint citrus. Beside each, the barkeep sets a tiny tin cup of chicory syrup, dark, smoky, tinged with the ghost of chocolate. You crack a cake in half, watch steam curl upward, and drag the crumb through syrup until it glistens. One bite, grainy crunch gives way to marmalade bloom, then the mild bitterness of chicory grounds everything. The flavors stack like soft blankets, sweet atop warm atop earthy, until even the bright prairie light seems muffled. Chew slowly, feel jaw muscles loosen again, let the sweetness linger at the back of your tongue exactly long enough for another lazy breath. Mid-morning, the freight line arrives with barrels marked Oranges, California, handle with care. Only a few fruits survive unbruised, their skin scratched by the long haul. The barkeep prizes the best of them to craft sunpeel cordial. He shaves zest into a pitcher of creek water, muddles slices of ginger, stirs in a spoon of prairie honey, then lets the mixture steep on the sill where sunlight can coax the flavors into union. When poured over chipped ice, the cordial tastes like the first laugh after a long silence, bright, unexpected, but gentle enough to keep the room in its dreamy sway. The ice chimes against tin cups, a soft counter-rhythm to the cicadas outside, and each sip quilts a cool layer across the day's creeping heat. Somewhere around the noon lull, a mail rider bursts through the batwings, pockets stuffed with letters and a single parcel wrapped in newsprint. The parcel holds a wedge of Italian Parmesan, exotic treasure on this side of the world. The cook, ever resourceful, shaves curls of the cheese into a pot of simmering jackrabbit ragout left from last night. The sharp, nutty ribbons melt into velvety broth, turning familiar comfort into something quietly astonishing. Bowls appear for whoever's near, and spoons resume their slow circles. Each draught hums with depth, and with it comes a hush, as though every taste bud requests silence to listen better. You lift your own imaginary spoon, the broth steam fogs your lashes, your shoulders slump another inch closer to the solace of cushions. When afternoon sunlight slants low and amber, Gideon the cowboy returns, this time balancing a lopsided basket of ripe hillberries, tiny cousins of the blackberry that grow sweet where rocky slopes meet river fog. The cook folds the fruit into a rough batter of flour, bacon drippings, and riverbank cocoa, then spoons fist-sized lumps onto a griddle greased with bare fat. The resulting dust trail muffins emerge burnished and mottled, pockets of berry syrup hidden like veins of amethyst inside crumb the color of dark leather. A single muffin weighs heavy in the hand yet breaks apart feather light in the mouth, berry juices staining fingertips a twilight purple. Lick that juice from your thumb, taste late summer forest, taste sun-warmed stone, taste the gentle promise that no road, however dusty, is starved of sweetness forever. Outside, heat shimmers above the street. Inside, the saloon's house cat unspools herself across the piano lid in a ribbon of sun. The piano man plays a tune so languid each note seems to land, look around, and find no hurry to leave. The melody swells and recedes like slow tide, and conversation subsides to respectful whispers. In that stillness, the barkeep unveils another small miracle, sage ash candy, thin glassy sheets of sugar infused with ground sage blossoms, smoked lightly over cedar chips. He cracks the sheet into shards that sparkle like frost and offers them from a tin painted with faded roses. You place a fragment on your tongue. It sparks sweet first, then earthy, then smoky, then is gone, leaving only a phantom coolness that traces your palate long after. Follow that coolness down your throat, into your chest, watch it unfurl through ribs, and feel how each breath deepens, how eyelids hover, flutter, hover. Dusk hushes heat at last. Shadows puddle beneath tables, and lamplight blooms like tame fires. The cook hangs a black kettle over the coals for his final creation of the day, moonwatch porridge. He stirs together oats, river water, grated apple, a thumb of fresh ginger, and one thin stream of sage julep left in the bottom of the pewter shaker. The porridge thickens slowly, each bubble releasing aroma that straddles sweet and spice, night and day. When served into shallow bowls, it glows tawny in lantern light and ripples faintly as if stirred by unseen breeze. Patrons cradle bowls in both hands, not to rush, but to warm palms, wrists, pulses. They sip rather than spoon, eyes half closed, and the room gentles to a heartbeat barely louder than breathing. Drink from your own invisible bowl, let porridge warmth pool in your belly, anchor you, invite gravity to finish its patient pull toward oblivion's cushion. Dusk hushes heat at last. Shadows puddle beneath tables, and lamplight blooms like tame fires. The cook hangs a black kettle over the coals for his final creation of the day, moonwatch porridge. He stirs together oats, river water, grated apple, a thumb of fresh ginger, and one thin stream of sage julep left in the bottom of the pewter shaker. The porridge thickens slowly, each bubble releasing aroma that straddles sweet and spice, night and day. When served into shallow bowls, it glows tawny in lantern light and ripples faintly as if stirred by unseen breeze. Patrons cradle bowls in both hands, not to rush, but to warm palms, wrists, pulses. They sip rather than spoon, eyes half closed, and the room gentles to a heartbeat barely louder than breathing. Drink from your own invisible bowl, let porridge warmth pool in your belly, anchor you, invite gravity to finish its patient pull toward oblivion's cushion. Rain returns close to midnight, not in sheets this time but in soft silver threads. On cue, the barkeep lights a single slab of beeswax, shapes its flame with cupped palm, and drips molten amber into a pan of river ice. The wax cracks, fragrances of wildflower and smoke bloom, and air seems to thicken with peace. Somewhere in that hush, the house cat yawns, a long silent gape, then curls into a crescent of fur at your elbow. Her purr begins, tiny and regular as a fisherman's cast, and settles at the base of your skull, a rhythmic engine sanding rough timber of thought into velvet. Outside, the freight wagon's quiet. Insects hush. Even the wind forgets to knock the signboard chains. The saloon's great oak bar stretches beneath its waxy polish like a placid river, no ripple, no rush. You trace an idle fingertip along its grain. In that motion lies all the distance between wakefulness and sleep, a span smaller than the width of a palm. Close your eyes. Hear the distant ticking of the wall clock, slow, kind, forgiving. Each tick is a footstep away from daylight, each tock a step deeper into moonlit drift. Tick, tock, tick, tock, barrels sighed, shutters stilled, and somewhere in the back room, a jar of mesa marmalade settles with a soft pop of its cooling lid, final punctuation on the day. There is nothing left to see until dawn sketches new gold along the horizon. There is only to rest, cradled by the sense of blue corn cakes and sage ash candy, by the hush of harmonica drift, by the slow-wheeling galaxy beyond the rafters. So nestle deeper beneath that imaginary quilt stitched from prairie winds and lamplight glow, and let the saloon keep watch. Its doors will open again, its stove will spark, its stories will pour, always ready, forever calm, whenever you wander back, half dreaming, in need of another long sip of boring history for sleep. A faint hush settles over the prairie long before sunrise, the sort of hush you only notice when you're already half listening for something else, crickets, perhaps, or the distant roll of thunder that never quite arrives. In that hush the saloon breathes, and the slow, sighing timbers seem to remember every laugh, every tired footstep, every spoon clink that drifted away into yesterday's dust. Somewhere behind the bar, a single ember glows inside the iron stove, holding on just enough to make the morning's first fire easy. The cook, rubbing sleep from his eyes, kneels to coax that ember into a bloom of flame, feeding it curls of dry cedar until the crackle rises like applause from a small, early bird audience. While the fire finds its stride, he sets out a tin pan of dry hominy, yellow kernels flattened like tiny moons, and sprinkles them with river salt and a bare whisper of red pepper. Onto the stove the pan goes, and soon each kernel starts to pop, not as loudly as corn but with a polite tap tap tap, as if hominy respects the hour too much to shout. The aroma floats upstairs, a mild corn sweetness tinged with smoke, nudging sleepers to adjust their pillows or stretch toes beneath quilts without quite waking. You might feel it, too, that gentle tug at the edge of consciousness, soothing rather than summoning, promising there will be comfort whenever you decide to meet the day. With the hominy puffed and toasty, the cook tips it into a wooden bowl and drizzles a ribbon of warm mesa marmalade over the top, letting the citrusy syrup sink into every crevice. He calls the dish sunrise gravel, because prospectors claim a handful keeps a belly full clear through till noon. Patrons who wander down early cradle tin bowls in both hands, blow across the steaming kernels, and chew slowly. Each bite collapses with a faint crunch, then dissolves into mellow sweetness that lingers behind the teeth like a friendly ghost. Picture that flavor settling into your own senses, the warmth radiating outward from your core, glazing your nerves in a calm that feels both awake and still dreaming. Soon a lanky ranch foreman sidles in, hat in hand, asking for Trail Kiss coffee. That's bullet coffee with a spoonful of prickly pear syrup stirred in. The barkeep obliges, tamping grounds tight, adding a clean eggshell, letting the brew tumble dark and clear into a chipped enamel mug. The foreman sips, sighs, and sets the mug down so gently the tin barely clicks. That gentle click is a perfect metronome for the room's rhythm, slow, measured, content. Outside, a milk-white mist drapes the street, blurring hitching posts and wagon ruts into soft watercolor lines. Through the mist comes a silhouette, a Pony Express rider carrying saddlebags that jangle like sleigh bells. He drops 2 small parcels on the bar, one wrapped in calico, the other in wax paper. The calico holds a bundle of dried apricots, leathery but fragrant as summer orchards. The wax paper conceals a hunk of maple sugar solid enough to knock dust off a boot if you dropped it. The cook's eyes sparkle. Apricots and maple together mean only one thing: amber-glow fritters. He dices the apricots, mixes them into batter made from blue corn flour and cold creek water, then grates a curl of maple sugar into the pot until the crystals melt away like tiny snowflakes on a warm tongue. Spoonfuls of batter hit sizzling lard, and the fritters balloon, edges crisping, middles turning airy and light. A sprinkle of coarse salt finishes them, balancing sweet and savory with the ease of a tightrope walker strolling a rope no wider than hope. The first fritter lands on a plate, and steam loops upward, carrying notes of maple and stone fruit straight into the rafters, and maybe through whatever headphones or speakers cradle this story in your room right now. Breathe it in, feel shoulders slacken. If scenes like these help your nights drift softer and your mornings rise gentle, tap that subscribe button so you never miss the next quiet wander through history's back door. One small click keeps our saloon doors open and the stove forever warm. Subscription whispered, the story rolls on. Mid-morning light filters through swirling mist, painting golden stripes across the bar. A violinist passing through, case slung over one shoulder, eyes still shiny from little sleep, unpacks his instrument and lofts the bow. He doesn't play anything rousing, just a line of slow scales that slide up and down like deep breaths. Wood and string hum together, filling spaces between heartbeat and thought. You listen, feel every note stretch time a fraction longer, and discover each breath you take now seems to last twice as many heartbeats as before. If scenes like these help your nights drift softer and your mornings rise gentle, tap that subscribe button so you never miss the next quiet wander through history's back door. One small click keeps our saloon doors open and the stove forever warm. Subscription whispered, the story rolls on. Mid-morning light filters through swirling mist, painting golden stripes across the bar. A violinist passing through, case slung over one shoulder, eyes still shiny from little sleep, unpacks his instrument and lofts the bow. He doesn't play anything rousing, just a line of slow scales that slide up and down like deep breaths. Wood and string hum together, filling spaces between heartbeat and thought. You listen, feel every note stretch time a fraction longer, and discover each breath you take now seems to last twice as many heartbeats as before. The cook, catching that hush, chooses this moment for blanket stew, a broth thick as cream, spun from mashed potatoes left from last night, fortified with curls of Parmesan, brightened with sage leaves fried crisp in bacon fat. The stew ladles heavy into wide bowls, settling in folds like a wool blanket. Patrons cradle the bowls against their bellies, spoons forgotten, simply inhaling the scent, a mixture of wood smoke, dairy warmth, and garden herbs, until eyelids dip like sails in slack wind. Let that scent drift to you, sink through your chest, cushion every nerve as though the stew itself were tucking you in. Outside, the sun climbs, burning away mist to reveal a cobalt sky. Heat will come, but not yet. In this gentle interlude the barkeep brings out an amber bottle labeled, cordial of cattail pollen, a gift from a marsh trapper who swears a splash in cool water calms the mind better than any draught of brandy. He tips golden liquor into chilled tin cups and hands them around. The cordial tastes of wildflower and riverbank, of soft breezes riffled with cattail fluff. One swallow and the chatter in the room thins to murmur, a second and even the violin's hum seems distant, cushioned, safe. Sip along, notice how the quicksilver of thought slows, how the corners of your vision feel padded with down. By afternoon the freight wagon returns, this time bearing crates of green glass bottles from a San Francisco brewer experimenting with steam beer, lager yeast fermented at warmer temperatures. The barkeep pops a cork, foam rises, fruity and bright. He pours thin streams into squat tumblers, tops each with a curl of pickled dill to cut the sweetness, and serves a plate of sage ash candy beside every glass. Patrons clink, sip, crunch candy, and the pairing sparks conversation just lively enough to keep eyes open, but never loud enough to break the spell woven by violin and stew. If you fancy, take your own imaginary tumbler now, watch tiny bubbles rise, feel the clink vibrate through fingertips, savor the mellow sigh that follows each swallow. Towards dusk, summer thunderheads build far off, all lavender bellies and silver crowns. They look loud but keep their distance, rumbling soft like a friendly giant clearing his throat. Inside, lamps kindle early, and the cook readies his twilight finale, stormdrift pudding. He slices day-old rail-spike biscuits into cubes, soaks them in mountain thaw cordial until they sponge up cool spruce sweetness, then folds in dried cranberries for sparks of tart. All of it bakes in a Dutch oven until edges turn caramel, centers stay soft, and the top shells barely crisp. Serve it with a drizzle of riverbank cocoa and a flurry of powdered maple, every bite a thundercloud, dark outside, glowing warm within. Take one spoonful in your mind, feel the crust crack, the center sigh, the cocoa wash over taste buds like distant rain over prairie grass. Night settles. Thunderheads glide away, leaving only the hush of crickets and a soft, steady breeze. The house cat twitches in dreams atop the piano lid, the violinist dozes upright in a chair, instrument quiet on his lap. One by one, patrons lift from stools, stretch lazily, and drift up the narrow staircase toward their bunks. You rise, too. Each step feels cushioned, each board creaks a lullaby. Quilt meets shoulder, pillow cradles cheek, and somewhere downstairs an ember winks its last goodbye. The saloon sleeps, but its stories hum on, inside barrels of oats, between cedar smoke memories, beneath every groove in that oak bar where countless elbows left quiet echoes. And whenever your own night needs steadying, whenever waking worries chatter too loud, the doors will swing wide again, lanterns will gleam, and stew will bubble, For now, let the hush hold you. Drift easy. Dawn, and the next round of boring, comforting history, can wait until you're ready for another slow sip. Somewhere between the hush of midnight and the first pale thread of dawn, the prairie holds its breath. Even crickets grow hesitant, their rhythm slowing until silence feels thick enough to cradle you like a down-filled quilt. Inside the saloon, that silence deepens into a velvet dark, lamps cold, stove faintly warm, every chair tucked close as if each piece of furniture has chosen to curl up and drowse. Then, almost shyly, a single floorboard sighs. The cook has risen. He moves by muscle memory, striking a match he could almost light with closed eyes, touching flame to the stove's slumbering coals. A red glow blooms, tiny at first, then wider, like a sunrise rehearsing behind curtains. While he waits for the iron to wake, he rummages through a hemp sack of odds and ends left by last week's medicine show, dried lemon balm, a twist of candied ginger, and, most precious, a cloth packet of jasmine rice. Rice this far west is as rare as white peacocks. He weighs each grain in his palm and grins at the possibilities flickering awake inside his head. He rinses the rice in creek water until the starch fog clears, then drops it into a dented tin boiled with sweet milk, lemon balm, and a spoonful of hillberry honey. The mixture simmers, each fragrant bubble drifting upstairs in ribbons so delicate they sneak beneath doorframes. That aroma finds you where you lie, half turned among sheets, and strokes your senses like a feather, faint citrus, creamy warmth, and the ghost of summer flowers. You could wake now, but why rush when the scent itself promises the story will wait, will hold, will keep? By the time you descend, the milk rice has thickened into a silken pudding. The cook ladles it into shallow bowls, dusts each with grated candied ginger, and calls it prairie moonrise. One spoonful glides cool across the tongue before blooming into warmth that trickles all the way to your fingertips. Feel that trickle now, liquid peace, traveling vein to vein, dimming every bright spark of waking thought until only a comfortable glow remains. Outside, dawn fingers every knot in the hitching posts, painting them rose gold. A lone stagecoach creeps into town, its passengers bleary-eyed and stiff. Among them, a woman in threadbare silk cradles a box of tea leaves from Canton. She trades a thimbleful to the barkeep for a breakfast of comet cakes. The barkeep, never one to waste novelty, drops the leaves into a kettle with a thumb of mesa marmalade rind, creating Silk Road tea, citrus, smoke, whispers of jasmine riding steam. Patrons inhale, and the room seems to lengthen, like someone stretched the air to give every heartbeat more room. By the time you descend, the milk rice has thickened into a silken pudding. The cook ladles it into shallow bowls, dusts each with grated candied ginger, and calls it prairie moonrise. One spoonful glides cool across the tongue before blooming into warmth that trickles all the way to your fingertips. Feel that trickle now, liquid peace, traveling vein to vein, dimming every bright spark of waking thought until only a comfortable glow remains. Outside, dawn fingers every knot in the hitching posts, painting them rose gold. A lone stagecoach creeps into town, its passengers bleary-eyed and stiff. Among them, a woman in threadbare silk cradles a box of tea leaves from Canton. She trades a thimbleful to the barkeep for a breakfast of comet cakes. The barkeep, never one to waste novelty, drops the leaves into a kettle with a thumb of mesa marmalade rind, creating Silk Road tea, citrus, smoke, whispers of jasmine riding steam. Patrons inhale, and the room seems to lengthen, like someone stretched the air to give every heartbeat more room. If these sleepy wanderings ease your night and sweeten your slow mornings, press that subscribe button so you never miss another pour of frontier calm. One quiet tap keeps the stove lit, the story simmering, and the cradle-soft hum of history drifting to your pillow. Subscription tended, the sun climbs. Heat will follow, but for now a gentle breeze drifts through batwing doors, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant river mud. The cook seizes the moment to unveil riverbank hush puppies, cornmeal batter folded with minced wild onions and pearls of pickled dill. He spoons the batter into hot tallow. Each puppy turns a deep, earnest brown, crust delicate as lace, center fluffy as prairie clouds. They arrive in a tin pail lined with newsprint, and the newsprint wicks away excess grease with an almost paternal tenderness. Bite, chew, breathe. Note how even the faint crunch hushes rather than startles. The dill spark lingers just enough to keep eyelids from closing too soon. Mid-morning, as shadows shorten, an itinerant glassblower ambles in with a leather satchel of fragile treasures, blown goblets, narrow vials, even a prism that scatters tiny rainbows across the bar. In exchange for a plate of sunrise gravel, he leaves a thin glass siphon the barkeep instantly presses into service, dribbling steam beer down its slender neck into waiting tumblers. The beer aerates, softening its edge, and patrons sip slower, mesmerized by bubbles that spiraled like pocket-sized galaxies moments ago. Watch one bubble rise, pop, disappear. Just like that, another stray worry is gone. Outside, noon heat starts to hum, and the saloon shutters pivot half-closed. Light slips in muted, honey-thick. The cat relocates to a strip of shade atop a flour barrel, paws curled neatly beneath chin. The piano, neglected, decides to offer a single note when the breeze nudges its lid, just a lonely, wandering sea that fades before anyone can decide if they truly heard it. Silence expands again, filled only by the soft scrape of spoon against bowl. The cook, not quite ready for the lull to lull him, begins the day's great experiment, dust devil sherbet. He packs a copper tub with sawdust and the last chunks of river ice, then whisks cactus fruit puree with a splash of cattail cordial until it blushes sunrise pink. That mixture churns in a dented crank freezer, metal groaning like saddle leather. Patrons volunteer to crank, if only for the pleasure of anticipating the freeze. Minutes stretch into half an hour, arms tire, sweat beads. But when the lid lifts, the sherbet glows, soft, nearly shimmering, cool enough that each spoonful raises gooseflesh along forearms. Hold that chill in your own mouth, let it melt into a refreshing sigh, and notice how the heat of the day passes over you like a wave that never breaks. Late afternoon drags its feet, but the barkeep has a cure for drag: tumbleweed spritz. He muddles sage ash candy in the bottom of a cracked crystal glass, adds a splash of steam beer, a squeeze of orange peel, and tops it with seltzer siphoned from a dusty brass bottle. The drink fizzes with gusto, and every fizz sounds like a tiny bell signaling the next breath should be slower than the last. Patrons toast, sip, and lean back, minds sliding into a pleasant idleness where thoughts drift like tumbleweed across an endless plain, free to roll, free to rest. Evening shadows gather in the corner where the violin now sleeps, strings resting. Instead, a card sharp shuffles a deck deliberately slow, each card's papery slap a metronome punctuating the hush. The cook takes advantage of that undercurrent to start sagebrush risotto, yes, with jasmine rice again, this time simmered in bone broth, flecked with toasted hominy for crunch, brightened by stray leaves of lemon balm. He ladles the risotto into dented bowls and tops each with shavings of railway cheddar. Cheddar melts, risotto sighs, and one by one, spoons travel from bowl to mouth like planets on predictable orbits. Picture that orbit, bowl spoon mouth bowl, repeat, each loop slower, each breath deeper, each eyelash nearer to lowering fully. Outside, sunset paints everything copper. Crickets resume their cadence, louder this time, like a lullaby reprise. The barkeep lifts one last bottle, clear glass, label lost, but inside, preserved in cane spirit, float slices of wild pear harvested back when frost still kissed the earth at dawn. He decants the spirit into thumbnails of glasses, no more than 2 sips apiece, calling it sleepwalker's brandy. First sip tingles, second settles, and somewhere between swallow and heartbeat, you feel a curtain lower behind your thoughts, dimming brightness to a comfortable glow. Hold on to that glow, tuck it around you. Night rolls in. Lamps glow small, steady halos. The stove cools, embers low but content. Chairs scoot back with slow gratitude, patrons tip invisible hats to one another, exchanging brief, hushed goodnights. Upstairs, bunk mattresses sigh beneath the gentle weight of bodies ready to surrender. Your own pillow greets you like an old friend, sheets fold around your shoulders, and the hush outside grows thick as velvet once more. Let it hold you. Let the slow music of this long, uneventful history, of rice simmering, of sherbet churning, of sage julep whispering over ice, drift through your mind until even the idea of keeping your eyes open feels extravagant. There will be more tomorrow, new wagons, new parcels, fresh embers, different quiet miracles ladled into humble bowls. For now, breathe deep, deeper still. The prairie night is wide, the saloon's heart is gentle, and sleep, wonderfully boring, sweetly inevitable, waits just a single, soft exhale away. The night grows deeper, yet the dreamlike hush inside the saloon keeps time on a gentle, private clock, a slow pendulum that swings from ember glow to shadow and back again. Somewhere under the bar a knot in the old oak plank creaks, stretching like a cat after too many hours curled tight, and the sound echoes just enough to feel almost intentional, as if the building itself has decided it's time for a quiet stretch before drifting into its next slumber. Down in the stove a single coal still breathes, every few seconds blooming orange, then sinking into velvet black, the cycles so gradual you could count entire deep breaths between pulses. Let it hold you. Let the slow music of this long, uneventful history, of rice simmering, of sherbet churning, of sage julep whispering over ice, drift through your mind until even the idea of keeping your eyes open feels extravagant. There will be more tomorrow, new wagons, new parcels, fresh embers, different quiet miracles ladled into humble bowls. For now, breathe deep, deeper still. The prairie night is wide, the saloon's heart is gentle, and sleep, wonderfully boring, sweetly inevitable, waits just a single, soft exhale away. The night grows deeper, yet the dreamlike hush inside the saloon keeps time on a gentle, private clock, a slow pendulum that swings from ember glow to shadow and back again. Somewhere under the bar a knot in the old oak plank creaks, stretching like a cat after too many hours curled tight, and the sound echoes just enough to feel almost intentional, as if the building itself has decided it's time for a quiet stretch before drifting into its next slumber. Down in the stove a single coal still breathes, every few seconds blooming orange, then sinking into velvet black, the cycle so gradual you could count entire deep breaths between pulses. Before the pulse fades, the cook returns, bare feet padding soft as moth wings across cool floorboards. Even in the dark he can find every spoon, every pot. Tonight he reaches for an iron kettle with a handle worn smooth by 100 fires. Into it he tips a scoop of pearl barley left over from yesterday's freight, a fistful of dried apricots diced small, and a splash of carrot-colored moonshine the barkeep distilled from surplus winter squash. The barley clatters into the pot like small pebbles dropped down a wishing well, the apricots land without a sound, the moonshine sighs out a ribbon of vapor that smells faintly of toffee and hay. Creek water follows, then the kettle settles onto a ring of coals that glow just enough to coax the barley open grain by grain. As it simmers, bubbles rise thick and slow, each breaking on the surface with a lazy pop that drifts up the staircase as a soft percussion. You, half awake, hear those pops spaced like distant buoys tolling on a calm night sea, and your breathing falls into their rhythm. Inhale, small pop, exhale, small pop, until the pattern lulls every muscle into a syrupy ease. When the barley plumps and the liquid turns glossy, the cook stirs in shavings of the maple sugar brick until the porridge glows a muted copper. He sets the kettle off the heat to thicken while he prepares the finishing touch, a sleepy dust drizzle. He crushes dried lemon balm with candied ginger under the heel of his palm, sprinkles the crumbs over the porridge bowl, and lets the rising steam lift their perfume through the room. Each breath you take now grazes lemon and ginger, bright and warm at once, coaxing eyelids lower until the world narrows to a soft blur. Dawn is still hours away, yet a restless breeze finds the cracked window by the piano and slides through, carrying the faintest scent of wild mint from the riverbank. The breeze flutters a sheet of written music left on the stand, and one edge of paper taps a key, just enough to release a single, low note that melts into the shadows before it fully forms. That half note seems to pause in the air, unsure, then settles on your skin like the gentlest vibration. You can almost feel it as a physical hush, a friendly weight encouraging your pulse to drift even slower. If the calm in this saloon is easing your night, if every whispered aroma and sleepy note is wrapping your thoughts in velvet, tap the subscribe button to keep this frontier of hush alive in your feed. One quiet click lets the stove stay warm, the stories keep simmering, and the prairie nights stand watch for every time sleep feels just out of reach. Subscription tended, the room thickens again with fragrant stillness. The cook, satisfied that the porridge will wait, steps outside to breathe the star-stippled sky. Above, constellations sprawl brighter than any lantern glow, Orion tilted on his side, the Pleiades clustered like spilled salt, and the river of the Milky Way flowing in a silent hush too vast to startle. He tips his hat to the sky, then wanders to the rain barrel for a dipper of cold water. Each swallow lands in his stomach like a stone of cool clarity, grounding him before he slips back inside. While he is gone, the house cat descends from her barrel perch and prowls the silent floor, tail a question mark in the half-light. She pauses by the kettle, curls around it, and lets the faint warmth soak into her fur. A quiet purr begins, soft, steady, hypnotic. You might feel that purr resonate at the base of your skull, a steady hum sanding away the last sharp corners of wakefulness. Just before true dawn, the barkeep appears, hair still tousled, and finds the bowl of barley porridge waiting. He slices a wedge of railway cheddar thin as parchment, lets the heat melt it into amber puddles across the top, then carries the bowl to the table by the window. He eats in slow spoonfuls, watching the sky tint from charcoal to violet, from violet to bruised lavender. With every color shift, the room brightens a fraction, too subtle for eyes still steeped in sleep, but enough that the shadows around the piano retreat to softer grays. Outside, the first gull from the distant river flats drifts overhead, calling once, an echo that barely penetrates the saloon's hush. That single call is enough to coax the violinist awake. He lifts his bow and answers with one drawn-out note, low and sweet as warm molasses. The note hangs, curls, then fades, leaving the room even quieter than before. You might notice how the silence after sound is deeper, like lake water settling after a skipped stone, a perfect silence to float in. The cook places a second bowl of porridge on the bar, just in case someone else wakes soon. He sprinkles this serving with a dusting of powdered railway cheddar and a single shard of sage ash candy for contrast. Steam rises, carrying a new perfume, cheese saltiness twined with sugar smoke. It drifts upstairs and unfurls under your door, a reminder that comfort waits whenever you choose to rise, but not a moment sooner than your dreams decide. Upstairs bunkboards creak softly as the first early patron swings legs over the side, boots thudding in slow motion against the plank floor, laces rasping. Even the motions of dressing seem hushed here, as if the room itself requests everyone keep the gentleness intact. Footsteps descend, and a chair scrapes softly, its occupant offering a hushed, "Mornin'." No one replies out loud, answers come in nods, in half smiles, in the slow, deliberate reach for a spoon. Outside, the eastern horizon kindles. Light pours thin and pink through window seams, sliding across the floor like satin ribbons, looping around chair legs, climbing until it kisses the rail of the bar. The house cat abandons the kettle, leaps onto the oak surface, and stretches luxuriously in one of those ribbons, her coat glowing silver in the infant light. She yawns, mouth a perfect silent O, then curls again, tail over nose, to catch another hour of sleep. You watch, eyes half-lidded, and realize her drowsy grace mirrors your own slow drift back toward warmth and cushion. The cook places a second bowl of porridge on the bar, just in case someone else wakes soon. He sprinkles this serving with a dusting of powdered railway cheddar and a single shard of sage ash candy for contrast. Steam rises, carrying a new perfume, cheese saltiness twined with sugar smoke. It drifts upstairs and unfurls under your door, a reminder that comfort waits whenever you choose to rise, but not a moment sooner than your dreams decide. Upstairs bunkboards creak softly as the first early patron swings legs over the side, boots thudding in slow motion against the plank floor, laces rasping. Even the motions of dressing seem hushed here, as if the room itself requests everyone keep the gentleness intact. Footsteps descend, and a chair scrapes softly, its occupant offering a hushed, "Mornin'." No one replies out loud, Answers come in nods, in half smiles, in the slow, deliberate reach for a spoon. Outside, the eastern horizon kindles. Light pours thin and pink through window seams, sliding across the floor like satin ribbons, looping around chair legs, climbing until it kisses the rail of the bar. The house cat abandons the kettle, leaps onto the oak surface, and stretches luxuriously in one of those ribbons, her coat glowing silver in the infant light. She yawns, mouth a perfect silent O, then curls again, tail over nose, to catch another hour of sleep. You watch, eyes half-lidded, and realize her drowsy grace mirrors your own slow drift back toward warmth and cushion. The barkeep, lifting a fresh brew of bullet coffee, adds one trickle of cattail cordial to each cup, so little the color barely changes, yet enough that every sip carries echoes of marsh bloom and quiet water. Patrons taste, nod, and the room eases into a state halfway between waking and reflection, like standing knee-deep in a river whose current hums gentle lullabies around your thoughts. A male rider bursts in again, but even he seems subdued by the hush. Instead of shouting, he doffs his hat and sets a parcel gently on the bar. This one, wrapped in brown paper, contains a jar of sorghum pecan butter sent up from Louisiana. The cook dips a finger, tastes smoke-kissed molasses, roasted nuts, and declares it perfect for the comet cakes cooling on the counter. He splits a cake, layers a glossy smear inside, and sets the halves back together. Warm cake, melted sorghum, faint nuttiness, each scent weaves into the room's quiet, thickening comfort until simply breathing feels like napping. If this gentle river of boring, soothing history keeps rocking you toward rest, subscribing will make sure it always finds its way to your nights. Let each click be another log on the stove, another quiet creak of floorboards, another sunrise-colored dessert waiting for your slow return to wakefulness. Outside, the prairie light now shines clear gold. The night's hush loosens its hold, replaced by the hum of day, but inside the saloon, the pocket of calm endures. It lives in the lingering aroma of milk rice, in the slow curls of coffee steam, in the cat's rhythmic breathing, in the hush between violin notes that may or may not come. And it will remain, waiting, unhurried, through every dawn, every dusk, every gentle frontier flavor ladled into a bowl, until you return for the next chapter of quiet wanderings. So rest again if you like, let eyelids drift closed, let dreams unspool their own lazy maps, because the prairie is wide, the stove is steady, and this saloon promises endless supplies of sleepy calm to carry you wherever the night still calls. Good night.